Now, bonsoir, or good evening. Welcome to SpeakuP Monday, or Parlons le lundi, with Robert, who is normally here, sitting in this seat, but now he actually delegated that to me. So my name is Carole, and I will be your host tonight. One night, couple of, 6 weeks ago, I think, Robert took me aside and said, Carole, how would you love to host SpeakuP Monday? And I immediately thought that he had gone a bit bonkers. And I said, yes, but at one condition, which was that you would be the first person that I would interview. Because you always question people, interview people, but we actually never hear about the man behind the interviewer. So tonight, this is what I want to do. I want to really shine a light onto you, onto your achievements. I've got a couple of intentions for tonight, which I will only share actually at the end of our talk show. So this is episode 383 of SpeakuP Monday, and it's part of something which is called Destination Indonesia, which you created. So maybe we'll speak about that, maybe we won't. I've got a series of questions. I don't know how many of them I'm going to ask you, but there will also be time for the audience to ask questions, because I want you to take this opportunity to grill him as much as you can. That's why it's called a hot seat. So I asked you, as part of prepping for this, to send me 3 songs that really resonated with you. Now, normally people, when you ask them for songs, they send songs that have lyrics. You send me 3 tracks. Out of these 3 tracks, only 1 has lyrics. Good choice, by the way, because you chose some really cool jazz tracks, and I love jazz. You chose A Love Supreme by Johnny Coltrane, Expansions from Lonnie Liston Smith, and Gotta Have Freedom by Pharoah Sanders. The only one that has lyrics is Expansions. And it says, expand your mind to understand we all must live in peace together. Extend your hand to help the plan of love through all mankind on earth. Why did you choose these 3 tracks, and what do those lyrics say about you?
Firstly, what a beautiful start. And, you know, here as well are my kids and my wife somewhere, which is, I think it's the 2nd episode that they've ever sat in on in Tropical Nomad anyway. So this is going to be interesting to see how they respond to some of these answers. So look, first question. So each of them have got a deep significance and meaning for me. So Lonnie Liston Smith, and even the words that you've said, because I don't often think of the words, I know it sounds weird, but hearing them spoken to me, like, also impacts me palpably, so it's still working. So it comes back to growing up for 17 years in 2 children's homes in London. And there I learned so much of who I became today. And, you know, this thing about that track was that we used to fight like cats and dogs, right? There were 17 kids there at one time. I was always the youngest one, all different nationalities from different parts of the world. And it was a constantly revolving door. So over 17 years, I would have seen hundreds, right? And maybe 100 plus. So what that song signifies for me is that, you know, when we were faced with a universal threat, there was, for example, once, anyone remember the mods and the skinheads here, rockabillys, all of that, showing your age, right? So once, our house was attacked by about 40 mods. Long story, I won't go into it, but it was attacked. All of the kids in the children's home that usually would fight against each other fought together to repel this force from an exterior location. So what I realized then was that actually we can find peace with each other when there's something that we're all going for together. And that kept on reoccurring. I was about maybe 10 when that occurred, but it kept on reoccurring in different parts of my life. One other part was a really powerful racist attack that happened not long after that, 2 years after that. And again, I'll cut to the chase. After this attack happened, I felt ashamed. I felt upset. I wanted revenge. All of these, what we call dark emotions, right? Because I didn't really perform as I thought I should or could. So I was left wanting in a serious way. On the third day after these feelings began to kind of subside a little bit, I remembered that 6 months prior to that in history was we were studying the 100 Years' War, which happened in Palestine. And a kid at the back of the class put his hand up. Miss, 100 years, yep. Can't be the same people fighting, can it, miss? I missed the whole point. But that time, 3 days later after that attack, 6 months after the lesson, I understood. Whoever started that fight with me, and it was about 20 people that were involved, was ignorant. It was passed down from generation to generation to generation. And that's why the whole N-word, racist slurs, comments fueled with alcohol and everything else, it was down to that. So I had a choice to make. And that was, do I choose to get into that revenge and go where that takes me? Or do I choose to see the peace in that moment and then realize that this person was acting not because they knew what was happening. It was all of the inputs that had been instituted within them young, and they were living that out. And that's, again, another moment of peace, right? And look, the other two songs, different reasons, A Love Supreme, bebop, this era of jazz, was very powerful because, you know, black musicians were not allowed to go into the clubs through the front door that they were performing or were the feature attractions in. They had to go in the back door. And there's all of these other segregative, separate ways of being and treating people. Through music, they were able to convey all of the issues and challenges that they were facing in the moment and the revelations. So bebop to me and Love Supreme hits all of it. When you close your eyes and you sit down and you listen to it, and you can, it's like you're transferred to where they were, and you could hear all of the angst, confusion, hatred, upset, love, and hope in that one track. So that's why I love Supreme. Pharoah Sanders, another saxophonist, another horn player. If anyone knows Pharoah Sanders or the work of Pharoah Sanders, a deep motherfucker. Like, this guy is, he goes deep again. And you got to have freedom is, again, like this understanding that no matter what's happening around us, what we're going through, and in the children's home, there were many things that happened outside of that. But no matter what is happening around you, there's part of you that you can keep separate from all of that. And you can protect and you can nurture. And that's where the hope comes from within. So if you can protect that from the forces that are maybe trying to do other things with it, then you're able then to use that for a force for good. So that's why those three tracks came up.
So when I listened to the tracks, that's also what I felt, that there's such a mixture of love, but also a lot of angst and a lot of fighting. And for me, it was such an expression of what love is in its all, the very challenging sides of it and the amazing, blissful aspects of it. Yeah. And I thought that those were very honest tracks that really expressed the depth of love, not the romanticism of it, but really the breadth and the extent of it. You said something about fighting and then finding love, and then being in the children's home and then finding freedom. I would love you to expand on how do you find peace when you are in an environment that is not necessarily loving, and especially when your father and your mother, your family is not there to protect you, to support you. Because I would say the logical thing that a young boy or a young girl would do in that situation would be to feel really betrayed, abandoned, and angry. But it looks like those moments of fighting for you, they were moments not of anger, but of channeling something that was different in order to create love and to access love. Can you speak about that a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this power of alchemizing the shit into gold. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah. So there's two things which come up right now. Anyone heard of attachment disorder? Yeah? Or abandonment disorder, right? Because you actually named it. So what it is it's quite common. It's when, as a person, like you feel that you can't trust someone with your intimate, deepest emotions and feelings. So the way that it manifests itself, well, in my case, is that, so on the outside, after I got over this deep sense of being like an introvert, I'm an introverted extrovert, then came this ability to make friends very quickly, to be the life and soul of the party, right? So to bring people toward me. But then what happened is that when it gets to that point of intimate relationships and being very close to somebody, then was the fear of being left or abandoned. So the response is, I'll abandon them first. I'll leave them first so I won't get hurt again. So this attachment disorder, I didn't realize what it was till, I think, my late teens. But the other side of attachment disorder is that it gives you this impenetrable wall that people cannot get in. Because if there was a sentence, it would be, I was born alone and I'll die alone. That would be the sentence that wraps up, that sums up attachment disorder. So when I was growing up in the kids' home, that's what was happening, right? So I was protecting myself from the outside world and not letting that get to me. By having this internal wall that was deeper within than the surface. The other part of that, which it seems in conflict with, was that I always had this incredible ability to see the good in people, right? And where that came from is not quite there at the moment, but I always was that person where people would always say to me, Rob, you always see the good in people. I see this guy as an idiot, but you see the good parts of him. I see that this person is da-da-da-da, but you see the other side of him. So this was always deeply there for me as well. So those are the two, what felt like conflicting forces that were happening. And so one gave way to the other. So this attachment disorder, once I was able to name it, then gave way to love. Because then it's like, well, attachment disorder is this fear of being hurt. The opposite, hurt is fear. The opposite of fear is love. Going through this children's home, there were several people who showed me love. Right? One was Doris, right? So Doris was a cleaner, right? So she wasn't a member of staff. She was a cleaner. And her son just contacted me a few days ago. That's why it's probably hit me. And Doris and Betty, they both had kids. And they thought, and it was a good children's home, right? But they thought that they weren't doing a good job. So these cleaners would parent me probably more than the others there, right? So they ended up becoming really close. So I think part of my access to nurturing love was through her, funny enough. Yeah, so, So Doris, the name was, yeah. Because she passed away, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, but her son is still alive, living in the same house. Yeah, so these are the things, that attachment disorder, and then realizing that I can trust other people. They wouldn't want to hurt me. And that was a person that epitomized it. And I think that was a way that I started to be able to kind of bring people toward me and hold them closer than I was able to do before. Yeah.
So this beautiful story that you have about Doris, it's absolutely gorgeous. I think that so many people do not see what I call small people, people who don't shine by their status. And there is a beautiful story about journalists interviewing a cleaner at NASA, I never know how to pronounce this thing, just before they sent a rocket to the moon. And they asked the cleaner, what is it that you're doing here? What is your job? And his answer was, I help put people on the moon. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And she was so much more than a cleaner. She was a mother to you. So from mother figure to father figure. Because there is an increasing number of men, of boys now, growing up without fathers. And they don't have role model. They do not know how to enter relationships because they haven't seen love demonstrated from a man. They don't know how to show up in a relationship. So before we actually talk about that aspect, where did you get your inspiration from? Who was there to teach you how to be a man? Was there anyone? And did you learn it in a completely different way?
Great question. I mean, there are a handful of people I could name. One was a guy that I grew up with in the children's home. He was everything that I wanted to be. Handsome guy, great body, got all the girls, incredible fighter, right? Like karate, kung fu, like he just seemed to dominate everything. He became the first black, is either head chef or sous chef of the Dorchester or the Savoy Hotel in London. Right now he has the Soho in London. So everyone knows the Soho, he's probably still there. Gary Lee, his name is, right? So he was one guy who was just, there was something in him that took the time, not all the time, but every now and again, he would teach me how to volley in tennis. He would teach me how to play football, right? He was one. There's another guy called Monty Edwards, who is a member of staff. So these member of staffs are like surrogate parents, all from different backgrounds. Monty was Jamaican, like my parents. And he just came with this older, big, long beard. He was a cool-looking motherfucker, right? You look at him and say, like, that guy looks cool, right? He looks like a dashiki, like a musician, like a beatnik, right? And so Monty was a guy who was always cool, right? And he was a guy just saying, look, man, like, take it easy. You have responsibilities. But he gave this more laid-back perspective. There was another guy called Lee Burke, who was a short guy, wore a trilby hat, white Jamaican. Now, Lee was like precocious, right? He was a gangster. And this guy was always saying to me, Rob, you got to be a man. And this guy, had a like a spliff hanging out one side of his mouth, the trilby hat to the other side. Now, this guy was shorter than me, but I looked up to him. He got involved in a fight. He ended up getting shot in the head. Some crazy stuff happened. But he was one of the guys who instilled in me this sense of, like, stand up, be a man. Another one, Ivan Loffman, he was one of the fastest sprinters in the UK. And a guy called Linford Christie became world champion at some point. He was beating his nearest rival a few years earlier than that. So had he have continued, this guy would have probably been a world champion. Amazing, Ivan. I was scared of this guy, right? And it turns out that at the end of all of it, he was the guy who I was most in fear of, but he was the guy who was the biggest humanitarian amongst all of us. And I found that out later. So I had lots of different, role models. But what it was, because I was an introvert early on, right? I had a chronic stutter. I'm talking like I would start a word, you could go away, make a cup of tea, come back, and I'm still in the same word. Right? I had mechanical jaw issues, goes to suck my fingers, pull my jaw down. So even now, when I close my mouth, my tongue comes through my teeth. Right? So I had a lisp as well. So all of these things, plus being the youngest, being bullied at times, I was an incredibly introverted introvert. Right? But that gave me the opportunity to see what other people were doing and what was happening. So with Gary, I hope you don't mind me talking, my brother, Gary had lots of girlfriends. And at one point, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but maybe he was letting them know that he was having fun and wasn't into a relationship per se. But what I saw was these beautiful women. When I would talk to them afterwards, I would see that they were excited to be with him, but I could also see the doubt, fear, and like the despair of realizing that they weren't the only one. And that they actually, in a way, and this is me reaching out, didn't matter. So what I got was, fuck, like, this guy, my hero, is hurting these women. I don't want to be like that. But remember, I was too shy to even look at a girl sideways at that point. So my best friends were all girls because I wasn't comfortable being around men. And they probably realized that I was no threat to them, right? I was never going to ask them out. I was never going to make a move. It was never going to happen, right? So it's like, yeah, this is our friend, you know? So then we had all these conversations, and it was the women who actually began to tell me what they wanted and the things that they were not getting from that relationship or this relationship or so on. So little did I know, I was being prepped as a relationship coach, which I became years later. But that's probably where it started, which I've only realized now through you asking that question. But yeah, so they were the male role models. But having this ability to be an introvert, which is great because then you really get a chance to look and see what's happening because you're too afraid to be the center of attention or too afraid to speak or give your opinion on anything. It gives you this ability to look to see what's happening. The guy did that. That was the outcome. I don't want to do that. Right? Lee was supposed to be the guy who got shot in the head. He was supposed to be a drug dealer. I'm not sure if that's real or not. But then for me, it was like, right, I never want to be that. I never want to be a drug dealer, even if it was true or not. Right? So I never did, for example. Yeah.
Okay, I really want to speak about this relationship with women because it's something that I have seen in you. We've had a few chats about how come 50% of your panel is not female? What the hell are you doing?
Carole's full on, man. If you don't realize now, this woman is not for trifling with.
But what I have seen is that you have put women here in the position of being interviewer, Bhavna, Natalie, Naomi. So I have seen how supportive you are of women. And knowing of your story, knowing of the fact that you grew up without a mother, again, a lot of men would have just created a story about, I don't want to have anything to do with women, I have serious issues. And you were able to really open your heart and see life through the eyes of women. So you also have a very determined, strong-minded, powerful, empowered wife. Oh, yes. And two daughters. Yes.
I'm outnumbered at home, 3 to 1. I've got no chance. So
how is it to have a relationship with a woman who makes you, I would guess, accountable, and who is strong, who is powerful? Do you think that you have to show up in life in a different way by having her in your life? And really my question is, how have you grown through being a husband and a father as a man?
Yeah, what a question. So firstly, I got to say, right, I make mistakes all the time, right? So if you ask my daughters, it's, oh, man, Daddy, we hate you. What? Daddy, we love Mommy. What? We don't love you. What? So I would love to say that I make no mistakes, but it's not true. I do. I make mistakes all the time, and that's the first thing, just to get that out. Because if they're around, they'll probably come and say on camera, "Daddy," no. So that's the first thing. So the second thing, I went through 3 relationships, which were like a year each, and they all came to an end because of the same reason. It was me pointing a finger saying, "Yeah, but if she was that or if she was this, I would be there." So in other words, I was, we know what it is now, right? 1 finger pointing out, 3 fingers pointing back. I didn't know it at that time. So I was doing all of this, yeah, but if she wasn't, if she was more like this, then I would be like this. Rubbish, right? But I didn't realize of this attachment disorder and how it was playing out. But then towards the end, then I realized the common denominator in all of it, because they were different women. So how can it be the same reason why the relationship is coming to an end when they're 3 different people? And I came to the horrifying conclusion that it's me. It's like, damn it, I'm the common denominator to all of them. It's like, And that brought me back to the kids' home and watching what Gary was doing. Sorry, Gary. What Gary may have been doing to these ladies, to these women. So then I thought, I'm the same. So then it was driven by, I have to make a change. I have to make a change. And that was part of this huge chapter of my life that was very self-fulfilling in the sense of the Landmark Forum. Anyone know what the Landmark Forum is? Yeah? It's this incredible conversation that happens over 3.5 days, and it's the most value for money self-development course I've ever done. And I've done quite a few, right? I've spent time with gurus, with Indian meditation masters, male and female, and traveled around doing all of this spiritual work to kind of come back to the beginning again. And then as a relationship coach, I began to see that, this is the important part, is that, like masculine and feminine energies in a relationship work together. And by the way, masculine and feminine energies doesn't mean that masculine is man, feminine is women, by the way. It doesn't have to go that way. But just to make it clear. So here's what I realized is that women or the feminine energy is like the container, right? Like the garden, the soil, the nutrients in that soil, right? The man is like a plant that you put into the soil. So, in other words, the feminine creates the container for the masculine to go higher, further, deeper than it ever would by itself. So these are some of the things that I learned whilst I was on that journey. And I thought, oh my God, right? So then when you bring all of that back into what I've already said before, then I kind of realized that, man, like you need to work it out because, like, the masculine energy and the feminine energy together go far further than anything by itself because of what I've just said. But I still had a 20-year relationship that I still screwed up. Knowing what I knew, I still managed to screw it up because there's too much water under the bridge beforehand. But then by the time it came to Marina, it was like, right, I'm not going to fuck this one up, right? The same way that I've done before. So even though the attachment disorder is still there sometimes, it's not necessarily something that I can leave totally. But it's different because when you have an awareness of something, then when it comes up, you're like, yeah, I got you. Thank you for showing your head. You're not needed here. Thank you so much indeed. And show it love and let it go, right? So whatever the question was, I think the answer is somewhere in there. That's right. It was about women. So that's how I came to this point. Yeah.
And when you look at your daughters, are there aspects of yourself that you see in them? Maybe good aspects, but also bad aspects that you wish that they would change. And how much of a reflection of you are they? And also, what is your dream for them?
God dang. Oh, so the elder one, Alexa, is probably a little bit more like me. Very sensitive, very like has that energy of wanting to have empathy with people, wanting to bring people together, like wanting to be the peacemaker, right? The younger one is more like Mum, more like Marina. So sharp, so smart. Now, they're both sharp and smart, but in different ways, right? With Almira, she's just like very thoughtful, right? And just, she really processes something, but also has a very quick temper. You know, maybe not like Mum. Marina doesn't have a temper. Did I just say that? Yeah, so she is a fast processor, fast to get angry. But then, you know, we've been going through kind of breathing strategies and stuff like this to kind of help to let that move forward, move past, which she's kind of doing as well. But yeah, so I mean, they're the two different energies. So I look more like Alexa. My body type is more like Alexa. And then Almira's body type is more like Mum, more like Marina. So what do I want for them in the future is, like, we had a guest on not so long ago talking about AI. I think he's sitting over there. There he is. Yeah. And, you know, like, what I want from my daughters is that they have, we're talking about education. I just want them to have the best qualities for them to be able to make their own mark in the world, right? So that's things like empathy, resilience, wisdom comes later, right? But empathy, resilience, ability to be opportunistic, the ability to be fluid, right? So not too stuck, right? Because we feel that these sorts of qualities are the ones that the future is needed of our kids growing up now to make the future as best and as bright as it can be. So it's more about the qualities that we would love to instill as best we can or support and nurture within them, whilst recognizing who they are and not trying to change it to be something else. Because they're two different people, you know, and it's not like, well, you need to be more like this and you need to be more like that. It's more like, well, that's who you are. So let's see if we can nurture that and add in these things in there that we feel might give you a better chance going forward. And the same with this one. Yeah.
So what kind of father are you? Because in order to fashion, to guide two young women into this world to become empathetic, to become fluid, and more skilled, how do you have to show up as a father?
Oh, I don't show up as well as I could as a dad. Just got to say it straight, right? Because, and this is part of it, right? So I come from being a pleaser. That's what happened to me growing up. Only recently have I kind of said, you know what? I think it's enough of that. It's still there. It's never going to go, I doubt. But it's like, what else? Because I've got a family to feed, all these other things, right? So there's things that I need to do. So by the time I get home, usually a lot of energy has come out. I'm a very energetic person. I have a lot of energy. It's a force of nature thing. It's part of who I am. But when I go home, it's more about conserving, rejuvenating, replenishing that kind of energy. So I don't fulfill what I believe I'm capable of enough, because by the time I get there, I'm already just a little bit running on empty, right? So what kind of father am I? In a way, I've kind of given up on pleasing them. If that sounds right or wrong, who knows? Doesn't matter, right? But I don't fall into the bracket of trying to please them. I more come from the bracket of, you know, like, what do I need to instill for them to be, for Alexa, you know, maybe to embrace that she can trust herself, you know, and be stronger within herself. With Almira, you know, how can I, you know, instill this, just breathe, right? This she riles herself up, breathe. No, I'm not going to breathe. No. So I'm more like that. And a comment that they made a few days ago, which again, kids, they surprise you, but they also tell the truth, right? They said, Dad, you're too serious. Whereas everybody else out here sees me as like the life and soul of the party. At home, I'm too serious, right? But they also said, but you're also kind of fun too, right? So I do try and play with them and stuff like that. But they're right though, like most of my energy goes out to the world, not to them. And that's something which I'd like to get better at. But when I'm at home, it's more from the point of view of like not to be liked, doing it because I get liked points. I've already kind of said in myself, if you had to choose, I don't have to, like mom or dad, it's going to be mom every time. And I'm fine with that, right? So I don't need to be, trying to, compete or anything like that. So it's like, right. So the thing that I need to do or feel very strong I need to do is to instill within them these other qualities. So if someone is going to be rude to them, they're not going to fall down and say, why are you being so rude to me? It must be me. It's going to be more like, no, they're being rude because they've got something that they need to deal with. I don't need to take it on board, for example.
So I'd like to move into a completely different direction. You wrote a book. How long ago did you write this book, by the way?
I knew you were going to ask that. So it would be 6 years ago, that one. 5-6 years ago.
And it's called Soul Survivor. And you managed to actually find a copy of it on my insistence. Ow! Because you were always making excuses telling me, I don't have a copy. But I made you find one. And the title is How an Abandoned Child Went from Nothing to Everything. Yeah. How do you define nothing and how do you define everything?
Great. So the nothing in relation to that book was more about what the world sees is something, what the world sees is nothing. For most people, growing up the way I did, it's nothing. Meaning like you came from nothing, right? From that perspective. When I say everything, it's waking up to the fact that, we make our own choices, and I've made some bad ones too, by the way. It's that quote, right? When one truly commits oneself, then providence moves too. Right? So when the moment one truly commits oneself, then providence moves too. So providence is the place in the US, yes, on the New England coastline, but in this case what it means is that, and God moves too. Right? So to answer the question, everything in relation to that book was realizing that I can manifest almost anything in my life, right? That I could right the wrongs of the past, in a sense, and despite all of that, I can still become this. So it was really about an internal, more spiritual, metaphysical way of viewing it, as opposed to like I made $1 million, became this millionaire, and I'm now a billionaire with Elon, right? It wasn't so much based upon the money, though we made a lot of money and then lost a bit of money too. But that one was more about the internal shift, going from seemingly nothing to realizing that everything is in the palm of your hand, but you need to adjust yourself to be able to see, reach, achieve, and accept that. Yeah.
So you're black, and that comes with
enormous opportunities.
Enormous opportunities and enormous challenges as well. Yeah. Yes. And I know that there will be a lot of younger black men that will look at you. Yeah. And what advice would you have for them on how they should look at life or manage their life, especially if they are in a situation that they feel they don't control, and they feel perceived by others in a way that does not reflect who they are. Because I think this is a massive issue right now.
Great question. You know, it's like this. So what I didn't tell you is I was the only black kid at school for the first 13 or 14 years of school. I think there's one other black girl who was there towards the end called Rosalind. Remember my name. But I was the only black kid at school. So even though the children's home was pejoratively black or colored, I thought I was white for most of those years, right? Why? Because at school is where you spend most time. And all my friends were white, right? So I used to go back to their homes, hang out with their families and all the rest of that. I remember once, this lady, one of the moms, she saw me, she goes, oh. I'm like, all right, okay, what's going on? And she said, I didn't realize you were black. Right? How did that one sound, right? I didn't realize you were black. And that's what was like, oh, right? Why? Because I spoke so well. Why? Because all my friends were white. So that's how I spoke, right? I didn't want to stand out as being anything else. So I can be incredibly well-spoken when I really want to be, because that's how I grew up and that's how I coped with the circumstances, right? Fast forward from there, about 2 years when I failed some O-levels and really wanted to go to university. So I went to a place called Waltham Forest College, right? Waltham Forest College. Now, Waltham Forest College was like 98% black. It was one of the biggest culture shocks of my life. I can't tell you how uncomfortable I was. For the first 2 or 3 months, I was like, all of these black people in here. like, somebody get me out of here. Right? I'm laughing, but when I look back, I mean, what a shocking thing to say when you really think about it. But that's how I truly felt. I felt like I'm not special anymore. I felt like these guys were all of the stereotypes. Right? All the things that I'm not going to repeat, but you know what I'm talking about. That's how I kind of felt, even though in the children's home, the people I looked up to were black. Go figure, right? So I had all of these mixed messages, mixed stories. Even the women that I desired were Caucasian. Why? Because living and growing up in England, you're served certain things on a platter, and that's what you go for. And I did it. Right? So I was like, I'm not going to go with the black girl. No. So all of these things, which I look back upon, would just shake my head and go like, man, what are you thinking? And so going to Waltham Forest College was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because then I began to realize, people are people, right? And whether they're black or whether they're this or whether they're that. And then after that, there's a friend called Guy Chalkley. And Guy, if you're watching this, love you, brother. Guy Chalkley's dad is named called Keith Chalkley, percussionist, drummer. You might know him, actually, Morgan. And, he played on the road with Dizzy Gillespie, Davis, all of these greats. His home, he had a room which was wall-to-wall in vinyl. This is probably why jazz already hit me. And, and then so through this, I began to learn about black history, right? The music, the culture, and all these other things. And then later on, and this is going to be interesting for you guys to hear, when I found my dad again, I found out that in my family tree, they're Jamaican Maroons. So Jamaican Maroons are people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey. These were the guys who underpinned the American Civil Rights Movement. And they're in my extended family tree. I knew none of that then, right? That was going to be coming for me. So then, and the last thing I want to say is that, so the N-word, right? You know the word I'm talking about, don't need to say it. So I had a huge problem with this word because I think what it was is that in my mind, I think I painted myself as being white. So when someone pointed it out to me like, you're an N, I was like, wait a second, no, I'm not, right? So it hit me in a different way. So going through all of this to kind of piece it together, one of the biggest things which I had to do was to come to terms with all of this And what it was, and this is the advice, what I realized was, and this is around the same time of the racist attack, all of that happened at the same time, the 100 Years' War, the things you pass down from generation to generation, all of these things were coming into the same period of time. And then I realized that, this is really important, that, what is a word, actually? When you speak, you're pushing air from one place to another place. It hits your eardrum, right? It vibrates. That sends a message to part of the brain that makes it into a word. That word then hits the brain, because the brain is a filing cabinet, right, of the past. So that filing cabinet, let's take the N word. So the filing cabinet opens up under N, opens it up. What do you find? A derogatory term for this, that, and the other, or the intended meaning was derogatory. Then what happens? What happens then is that then that other message is sent back to the brain and an action occurs. I used to fight people when I was young. I used to beat kids up. It sounds all kind of like conflicting for me, right? But at some point, I was a bully. And I used to beat kids up for calling me the N-word, right? Boom. Now what are you going to say, right? So I was like that. And because I was angry too. And that's just part of the anger being processed of the situation that I found myself in, but didn't know how to deal with it. So the N-word, at the end of the day, what I realized was that, this is not about the word, it's about the meaning that you associate with the word. And that's what causes the upset and the pain and everything else. So going deeper into the N-word, it actually means king, right? So anytime someone called me, like, thank you. and their response was like, what? Because they were expecting a different response. So my advice, to kids growing up now is that, like, understand that you have power over your response. Right? Because even now, when I see fellow brothers using that word, to me, I don't really like it. I've got to be honest. I think we don't need to do that. Like, there's other ways we can do this, But through taking that example, bringing it in, it gives me the control, the power, the mastery, not the power, the mastery over how I respond. And then that happened with many other things. Because again, you pull a root, you pull a plant out the soil, don't do that. But if you pull the plant out the soil, all of these roots come with it. That's what happened. By pulling out that root, I healed so many things at the same time. So then it's about mastery over your responses, which having kids doesn't always work. I'm not always great at it. But in general, my mastery over that is very high because I realize exactly where it's coming from. And I realize that I'm proud to be black, right? But I had to go through that experience of, in a way, hating being black, which sounds really weird and strange. But I did. For a period of time, I looked down upon myself. And then through going through these experiences and then ending up with the Jamaican Maroon and studying the history and seeing all that and then realizing, my God, I have the forefathers racing and raging through my veins. I won't be stopped when I decide upon something. So that's how all of this can be used and can be funneled through earth, through air and everything else can be funneled through you and you get things done. You become a person of power and potency. And that's what I found through all of that experience, which is a long answer to your question, but you know what I'm saying.
So what I'm getting is that it seems to be essential to have an understanding of your lineage in order to have an understanding of your purpose and your force. Is that what you mean? That really only when we connect with our ancestors, with our past, with everything that has been carried for us through history, we actually can get a sense of who we are, and that is essential. That we must bridge back to who birthed us.
Love it. I spent in Sydney time working with the Aboriginals. Tribal warrior, respect, clean slate without prejudice, amazing program. wherever I've been, I've always ended up working with the indigenous population. It's Itchy who pointed this out to me a year or so ago, and I was like, oh, why is that? I'm attracted to doing it, right? So here it is. Yes, you need to know your history. Yes, you need to know your past. Not as a way to divide you from someone else, but a way to find pride in who you are and where you're from, and to do honor to all of that that's come before you. Like, for me, there's no coincidences in life at all, bar none. When you're going through shit, or if you're going through great times, there's no coincidences here. And life is, when the shit comes, life is giving you a window to find something deeper within yourself, even though you don't want to admit it at the time, maybe, because it's too hard. But that's what it is. That's my experience anyway. So what I would say, to your question, and that's really well pointed out, that, yeah, we need to know our own history, because when I brought up the Aboriginal population, for example, right? Again, I'm not pointing fingers necessarily, but it happened, the stolen generation, right? Who knows about the stolen generation? Anyone? Yep, a few people do. Stolen generation, what happened was that, so Australia is a huge country. What happened was that, kids from families were taken from one part of Australia to another part of Australia on purpose, to break them from their lineage, to break them from the stories that is enmeshed and ensconced in their whole culture, right? And they did it on purpose, to break them, right? Introduced alcohol, and the rest is history. So what it is that if we are divorced from our history, I believe that, yeah, it does the same thing. We're kind of dispossessed in some way. We don't know where we stand or where we fit in the world. And again, I'm all about inclusion, not division. So for me, it's about acknowledge your history and acknowledge the history of others, and come together around your differences as well as the things which you see eye to eye on, right? And to me, that's actually the key to creating communities that actually mean and actually last. Yeah.
What's your biggest fear?
In which area?
Well, that's actually an interesting question. I think what it is that you fear the most you won't have accomplished before you die.
Okay. The first response is ego, which is like, no, nothing, right? But let's go a bit deeper, because we don't need that. So let me just reflect on it a little bit. Yeah, so I truly feel that we all come into life with a mission of some description. That mission can be wrapped up in hardship, can be wrapped up in lots of different things, right? But at the end of the day, we're here to do something. And it doesn't necessarily mean I have to change the world. It can be I change my family, I change myself, right? So it's not about scale. So for me, I know that I'm here to do something special. I just felt it my whole life. And there's been times where I should have died a few times, maybe like many people here, but I didn't. It didn't happen. And the more that I begin to embrace it, the more I realize the direction that I'm heading. And you can ask me that question out, and I'll happily tell you where I'm heading. So for me, it's if I let fear stop me, right? If I let fear stop me from becoming who I know I was born to be, I think that would be the biggest fear.
So I have absolutely no clue as to what time it is. Can someone tell me?
Yeah, 20 past.
20 past. Oh my God. Okay.
45.
But yeah, I'll ask a couple more questions, and then we can go on you, the wonderful audience. So I hope you're brewing and thinking about something that you can ask Robert. I would love to know, what is the one thing that you've done that epitomizes the biggest expression of your love for someone?
Wow. There's two. The first one is about my family, which I can talk about later if you want. The one that comes up as being the one that I need to speak about now, and he might be watching, is a friend of mine called VJ Chand. And VJ, remember I spoke about seeing the good in people, and it's my thing. And we were in Milan. I was a model, working at this great agency called Riccardo Guy. And VJ was the guy which I slept on his floor, right? When I was there. And VJ and his parents, I think his dad, died of pancreatic cancer. And whilst I was there in Milan during this period of time, he got very sick. And to which extent this is true, maybe ask him. But what I felt that I did was to look after, to nurture. I studied about Chinese medicine and how that can help this particular type of cancer and all of this. And I think I did a bit of cooking and shopping and all the other things to look after a person who's not feeling very well. And that went on for a time. And he made it through. And, he's still alive today. He's probably better than ever. But that's the one that comes up, for me because, I really wanted this man to live, and I loved him dearly, because he had shown me a lot of kindness. He set me up, helped to set me up in Milan with everything that people have always done acts of kindness for me. I've always found it throughout my life. So I always feel and felt at that time that I need to return the favor. Yeah.
How do you attract kindness?
Ooh. So I would say to that, you attract the thing that you put out, right? For sure. How I've attracted kindness is that, it felt like, for many years, I was entirely in the service of other people. It's almost like I felt like, if I would name it, that I put a lot of really good karma out there, is what it felt like. Because I was in that zone and period of my life being a people pleaser and seeing the good in everyone. And I would coach people for hours. There's another story there. But yes, the answer to the question is that I've always felt I've given a great deal out. Yeah.
So you think that it's a good thing to actually give? Or how did you manage to create boundaries? Because what I'm hearing is that there seemed that you had a period in your life where you were a servant of, and you moved into being in service to. Yes. Yeah. So how did that happen? Because I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. They want to be kind, but then they might think that they are being taken advantage of. How do you navigate that line?
I think it's really challenging, because when you come from this background of always wanting to please people, it's very challenging because you have to rectify within yourself, right, that I need to look after me, right? I need to have my needs met as well. And it happened over time. So like now, I have more boundaries in place than before. Whereas before, all I would do would be that, because it would be out this need to please, right? So to get past it, to get through it, I think it's just something that, in a way, you have to come to your own understanding about, like even now, like the financial piece, I've earned a lot of money and I've spent or lost more, right? So the thing about that is that what I allowed to happen was the pleaser becoming so prevalent that then I'm not able then to receive. I'm always giving, but what it is that it's a challenge of not being able to receive. And that's a Band-Aid over a deeper issue within you, right? You give, but you can't receive. It's not them. It's something going on here that you believe that you're not worthy to receive. So I had lots of worthiness issues, which reflected in that, right? So ultimately it's an inner journey. It's learning how to appreciate, see, accept, but then also make the changes internally to then externally be able to say, you know what, this is my boundary. I'm not going to go beyond that, because after that, me, my family, and I, we're all going to lose out. You know, so that would be the answer.
So one more question. I mean, I've got so many, but you know.
We go to them. Yeah.
Exactly. You always appear to be super happy, you know, super dynamic, super entrepreneurial, super optimistic, super man. Yes. What makes you crumble? What brings you to tears, or what actually brings you to your knees, where you feel that, oh my God, what it is that I'm going to do next? Are there still? I mean, does it still happen?
Yeah, it does. Like, there's probably two sides to me, right? The introverted extrovert sums it up pretty well. And so the extroverted side is what most people see, right? Which is, doing what I do, the energy, the vibe, and everything. And it's on tap, right? It's there because that's a way to please people, right? So that was the winning strategy I used growing up, to be liked, right? To be the center of, not the center of attention, but the one cracking jokes, the one bringing everyone else in, right? So that is definitely present, okay? And what was the other part of the question? Just quickly.
I'm so mesmerized by you. What makes you crumble?
Crumble, that was it. Okay, so I often go through times where I have to have a pep talk to myself, right? So it's not that, you know, I'm this confident guy all the time and nothing phases me, right? On a certain level, that is actually true. Like, part of me feels that I've already lived this life. So I don't, you know, so not that I don't need to live it anymore, but like I've already lived this life, right? So sometimes, in a way, I have to create not the need, but to create the motivation to do things, right? But it's not coming from a place of despair. It's coming from a place of like, well, I've done that already. Do I need to do it again? Is what it feels like sometimes. So putting that aside, what makes me crumble, I wouldn't necessarily crumble, but what hits me and can bring me down is when, like I think for most people, when things don't work out, like if I have an argument with my girl, which happens rarely, but we had one the other night, right? Like that brings me down. You know, when people intentionally go out and do the wrong thing, that brings me down. Like, part of the thing that happened when, going back to this racist attack, walking past a pub, guy shouts out the N-word, runs up, hits me, floor, I'm down. More people run out, I run off, my friend stays and ends up getting a kicking for me, right? That's what happened. I look back, there's a whole melee of people kicking something on the ground. I didn't know what it was. I'd fight, flight, or freeze, I flew. Then I froze. And I looked back to see what they were kicking. As I walked back, I realized that he was on the floor, and there's like 20 guys kicking him. It's hard. Like, this is not soft stuff. They're kicking him hard. So then what happened was that, anyone remember the Cowboys and the Indians? Right? So the way it was painted was the Cowboys were the good guys, and Indians were the dirty savages, right? Later on you realize it's not the case. What happened was that at some point, I remember this, 5 or 10 of these guys just kind of walked away, and more guys came and walked out. I thought that they were going to do the right thing, stop it, let him get up, move on. No, they pushed him aside and started kicking him. So now it's 10 other guys with fresh boots kicking him. Horrible. And anyway. But what happened in me is that my childhood was broken right there, right then, because just like you think the Cowboys were the good guys, and when you find out it's not the case, that's exactly what happened to me then. So I saw one of the worst sides of human nature. and it scared me, it petrified me, and it pissed me off. So when someone comes and does something like that to me, who sets out of their way to do something against me, or someone I know, for stupid things like that, it pisses me off, because it's like, you just don't get it. And there's part of me which is like, still believes the Cowboys are the good guys, the Indians are the bad guys. So when that happens, it kind of breaks me inside, right? By now I'm older, so I have more strategies to cope with it, so I don't let it get so deep. But that's the sort of thing that pisses me off and upsets me, and by that mode, yeah, it makes me crumble.
Robert, thank you so much. Now it's time for the audience to ask questions. So yes, please.
So we have a third microphone just over here, Brother Guzman. Yeah, so thank you everybody as well. This, by the way, is kind of foreign to me. I'm not usually used to doing this. I can speak forever, I know that, but it feels very self-indulgent to be sitting here in front of you talking about all of these things. Just saying. So I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And those of you, whoever's watching this as well, thank you very much.
Can you say your name first and then give your question,
yeah.
please?
So, hi, I'm Lisa. And first of all, it's closer?
Yes,
okay, closer.
Perfect.
It's not self-indulgent, because I think all of us are getting a lot of value from what you're sharing. So, and my question is, what motivated you to write your book? So, what was that journey like for you?
Yeah. Three things. What I realized not so long ago, right, but before I wrote the book, was there's three things that I stand for, right? So one is manifestation. That's in all directions, because it's not that I always manifest the things that I want. Damn it, right? But there you go. I'm getting better now. The other one is connector. So I'm a connector of people. And the other thing is that I am an inspirer of the human spirit. Especially the last one hits me every time. So what's behind the book was on a spiritual level of contribution was about the last one, inspire of the human spirit. So I knew, that I had a book within me, because I'd spoken on stages by now and had coached a whole bunch of people, life coaching, relationship coaching, all of that, like in different places in the world, was understanding what I can bring, was an understanding of what I can contribute, was an understanding that I can shift people. Their energy, their mood, their vibe, I can do all of that with my voice, with the words, with the look. I used to dance as well, the way I dance. Anyway, it's not a story, but not that kind of dance. So I know that I have that ability. So on that level, it was like, this is something that I must do, right? Now, on the level of that's a little bit more self-centered, is like, so by that time, again, I was like a coach, doing more coaching than other things. So having a book is really good for coaching all of that, because it's like, oh, here's a guy, here's a book. Oh, there's a book. Let's book him to speak, right? So it was, at that time, commonly acknowledged that this is your way to get onto stages. So those two things, one more of a spiritual, this is why I'm on the planet, this is what I'm here to do, and the other one more of like, this will get me more money. This will get me a job, yeah.
Thank you. Azizi.
On? Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you for sharing so openly, because it's not easy, but it's necessary. And it's not self-indulgent, because for what you needed to overcome, if you didn't have that level of self-indulgence, we wouldn't have you here. So in this space. So my question, I think about, and we have similar stories in some ways in terms of abandonment. Unfortunately, in our communities, there's a lot of it. I think the difference is many people face abandonment in their own homes, in their own neighborhoods, but for people who are labeled so-called Black, we also have been largely abandoned by the world. So when you are abandoned in the center and then you can go out and you don't have the same stories or the stereotypes. So a lot of the things that I find many of us, when we want to move out into the world from a place of power and groundedness, a lot of our stories have to be left behind in order to do that. Because if looking back, there's just so much pain and trauma and violence and all the yucky stuff that you don't necessarily want to hold on to. But at the same time, I wonder, being a father, also being someone who's had to stand out. I mean, you clearly have built your body up to stand out, which probably helped you a lot in some ways. You know, you were talking about that shout. But needing to move forward, what have you found? And it could be specifically as a black man or a person coming from our kind of communities and backgrounds. What have you found that with all of that yuckiness in our story and our history, pretty much wherever? I'm talking about the kinky hair people, because many people we're in a melanated country, but we're talking specifically about kinky hair people. And what from your story have you found really necessary actually to bring forward with there being so much that we need to leave behind in order to hold your head up and move forward into the world without knowing that those stereotypes and all of these images are there and people don't necessarily see you first because of the images they've also portrayed us as? What have you brought forward that you have found actually that has been more a part of my story than I realized? You understand where I'm coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, it's a bit like this. At the age of 12, I wanted to be Secretary General of the UN. So after this racist attack, and I thought, well, I can be part of the problem or part of the solution, I was like, right, I need to do that, right? Eventually, I didn't go that way because I saw politics and all the rest of it, right? But it's never dimmed that light within me, right? So I still want to do that. Maybe not in that way, all right? Let's just call it out. So what I want to do is I want to be in a room with powerful people making decisions and be able to impact the decisions that they make through coaching, right? And through all the things that I've learned, right? The way I feel that I have access to is not government, is not politics, it's business. So by walking that middle ground, entrepreneurism and bringing that together, I know that I'm able to be in the right place at the right time, right? With people which are making big decisions. That's what I see, right? How does that relate to your question? So it was Nelson Mandela when he came in, and remember what he did was, he had that open slate for people to come through and to, tell people what they were guilty of without any threat of being prosecuted, right? What is it called? Not retribution. It will come back later on. Reconciliation. Thank you. So here's the thing, right? And this is a coach, remember, speaking. So I understand that we have this collective guilt. We have this collective trauma as a population. Every country has it. Every country has a shape, right? Russia. There was a civil war that killed almost all the men. You had next door neighbors turning on next door neighbors. All of this thing is locked within our DNA, right? The distrust, the need to feel empowered, the need to not be personal with anyone because I need to protect myself. All of these things are learned from back there. They're always part of us. So when Nelson came forward and did the reconciliation, it was a beautiful thing to do, right? And the thing is that murky, dirty, angry, dark, I said that twice, has to find its way out as well. You can't just put it down and just say, well, you've had your time to speak, you'll be all right now. Let's keep on going. It's like this. now I'm going to get into big trouble, right? Is Marina here? Maybe not. All right, she's probably watching. It's a bit like this, right? And help me out, please. If I get this wrong, don't hate me. It's like this. So, in general, women live longer than men. Why? Okay, if there's a situation that happens, let's call it the feminine, will tell you straight up. Get it out. The masculine, it's okay. It's all right. It's not all right. Hold it within. You don't let it out. One of the biggest killers of men as opposed to women is stress and how men handle stress. Men handle stress very badly. Sorry, guys. Women handle stress better than men. And the world perceives it to be, well, she's emotional, right? No, she's actually finding a route out for that emotion to travel out of her body, for example. So how does all of this relate to the question that you asked? Good question. It's a bit like this. So all of that murky, dark part of our past needs to find a way through. It needs to find a way out to the light. That way, it becomes understood, it becomes accepted, it becomes respected. Then you can move on. If you don't allow it to come out, then it's like you're pushing this thing down. It will find another route out. If it stays within the body, it becomes a cancer, right? So it needs to come out. When it comes to leaders and the way that I see the world, is that there needs to be a way for that to be okay. And it's very difficult to find. It's very challenging to find, but it needs to be a way that you can allow that to come, to like the Australian government just admitted recently about the indiscretions that they made towards Aboriginal people. Not picking on Australians, because we're all guilty of it in some way, shape or form, but it's in the top of my head. That's the beginning. And if we are coming back to peace, going to find a way to operate together and to be together truly on that level, like we have to see each other's shit too, and acknowledge it, accept it, and then move through it together is the way that I see it. Now, if the answer to your question or not, I don't know, but if you've got something else to add, please ask it, yeah.
I think you just gave me that answer to the question you hope I had asked. But I loved it. But I want to know what you specifically have found that you brought from your past, from all that grittiness, that's you realize was a big foundation, that it may have looked a bit gritty and ugly and dark and what have you, but what have you found that has actually helped you rise up because of that?
Yes. Thank you, my darling.
Yes.
And you're right. I asked a question that wasn't answered a question that wasn't asked. But there you go.
It was a good answer.
Thank you, my darling. All of it, actually. Like so many experiences. It's a bit like this. Not so much now. But I remember there was a time, when I'm talking to you guys, not talking to you guys. But there was a time in the kids' home where one of those moments of incredible affection and warmth between orphans, for want of a better term. And this is one of the guys I looked up to. And he said to me, Rob, I know you idolize me, but don't be like me, be better than me. I say again, a guy I really idolized, and he's like, and he saw that I used to dance like him. He got this special dance movie. I used to copy this guy, and he got it, right? And he's like, don't be like me, be better than me, because he could see his own shortcomings and where he was going. So each kid in the children's home that was there, even the guy who got shot in the head, all of these guys, it's almost like if shit ever gets too dark, they're always there. So when I say all of it, I actually mean all of them, because each one of them in their own way taught me something about being a man, right? Taught me about how to stand up in life even when shit is happening, right? So all of those kids played a part in who I've become today. And again, like, it's been a little while since I've called on all of them, right? But there have been moments where I've been in a darker place, and it's like I can feel them and I can see them all around me, just like, you got this, brother. Like, just like holding my hand, you know? There's one other thing which is relevant to this. So going through this white-black stage that I went through, so I had serious challenges about how I looked, because clearly not a white guy, right? As much as I thought that I was, right? So I used to go and sit on my bed with a mirror up to my face for long periods, longer than I really want to say, but long periods, right? And I used to pick myself apart. Nose, I'm going to get a nose job. I used to do this, right? So right? So by doing that with my mouth, makes you look a bit strange, but what does it do? It narrows my nose. I wanted a nose job, right? And I went systematically through all of it, because these features were not Caucasian, right? Clearly. So I wanted to change all of it. This went on for like months and months and months and months. One time, I remember things got so bad, right, that I don't think I'd ever commit suicide, but it was in my mind. No one knew this was happening, by the way, because I was upstairs on my own. What happened as I was going down and down and down and down and down was that for the first time, there was a voice that seemed to be coming from a loving place, not a place that was always putting me down. Because the self-talk was putting me down all the time. Yeah, you're not good enough. Yeah, you're not listening enough. Yeah, you get a nose job. Yeah, get a lip job. Yeah, sort out your head. Yeah, all yada, 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 yada. All of that was happening. So, for the first time, I heard this voice from somewhere else. And it said to me, Rob, just look after your skin. Rob, just look after your skin. First time I had heard that voice. I can reflect now and say maybe it was the voice of my soul, the voice of my fairy godmother, voice of my intuition. I don't really know, but it was the first time that I heard it, and that's when I started to listen to it more. Not all the time, but that was the first time I remember that it came up. And throughout my life, that voice has always been there. So to answer your question on which things did I take from my past that kind of helps me in my future, those two things stand out. The kids in the children's home being like the people which are always there in my corner because of that guy who said, Rob, don't be like me, be better than me, is one. And then the other side is that voice that I found in the deepest, darkest place, which I wanted to change everything, was like, mate, just look after your skin. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we answered that time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question. Joanna?
Hello. Once again, thank you so much for all the sharing. I highly appreciate it. I would love to know what is the very first thing you do in the morning as you wake up, and what is the very last thing you do before you go to bed?
Yes. Okay. In the morning, it varies, right? But in general, the first thing I do is give thanks. Right? To who? I don't really know. Call it the Almighty, the Creator, the Greater Spirit, but I give thanks. You know, I give thanks that I'm alive, right? That I've woken up another day. And then after that, the morning routine that I have right now is I listen to frequencies. So the first thing I do is headphones on, play. One is for the pineal gland. Right? And that one goes on for about 10 to 20 minutes. It sounds like interference. The first time I heard it, I thought, what the is that? So that's has to happen between 5 and 6 a.m. Not after, you can do it before, but not after. It's when it's most open. After that, I do a series of other meditations. So it could be, for example, one is called the Gateway gateway frequencies. So these were frequencies that they trialed throughout various times. Scientists in the middle of the US, in the desert, trying not mind control, but ways to free up the mind. So those gateway frequencies is what I do next. And then if I'm really up for it, I'll do another one that relates to chakras, 7 energy centers in the body. And there's about 10, 15 minutes of each one. So even though I wake up at 5, I'm still in bed listening to this stuff, right? And I found that it's pretty good. I've been doing that for about 50 days. Yeah, without missing one. Yeah. And then before I go to bed, the habit I got into is record something good that happened during the day. So when I go to bed, I'm going to bed with a positive experience, a positive memory of something that happened, and it can be small or it can be large. It can be literally seeing a flower and just seeing just how the light strikes it, and it just looks amazing, right? All the way through to something that happened on that day, which is like, wow, that's a miracle or that's a blessing, right? And I feel a sense of abundance because of it. Yeah, so great question. Yeah.
Beautiful. Robert, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and so open to sharing your past and to sharing your dreams. I know that we haven't spoken about the present, but a lot of people know about that. And exactly. There are a couple of things that that really resonated with me. First of all, we've spoken a lot about pain, about murkiness, about anger, about shame. As a kind of, final question, maybe just before final question. What is the one thing that a woman can do to help a man who struggles with anger, with shame, to be able to overcome that? And what do you think you've learned from being a husband that you can do for a woman to help her out of that as well?
You've got some beautiful questions. My God. All right. So, women and men. So there's a book, everyone's read, was it Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? Mm-hmm. I think a few people here, Dr. John Gray. So when I was doing the relationship coaching, which I still do from time to time for friends, it's men and women are different at our core, especially when we handle problems and challenges. So just to give it a frame, so let's look at the masculine first. So when there's a problem or a challenge, like men are the fixers, right? Oh yeah, I can do this, right? Leave it to me, right? But what men do is that they run away, walk away, move away. They find a cave, the man cave, right? To work out their problems and challenges and then come back with the answer. I've got the answer. With the feminine, it's not that. The feminine is let's stay, let's discuss. Let's go into this. Whatever comes up is what comes up, but let's go into it and let's find the answer together, right? So the problem happens in a lot of relationships when we don't recognize that about each other and what we need at that time. So for example, men, if your beautiful woman is going through something, right, and she's in the middle of it all, she actually knows what the answer is. Most of the time, right? So it's not about you being, fix it. I know the answer. Follow me, right? Unless it's asked for specifically. No. It's just being there with her and discussing it and being open to that discussion. Very important. But what men usually do is that they go, she's having a problem. I'll leave her to work it out. Why? Because that's what I would do. So then they go away, and then come back and say, hey, have you worked it out yet? And then what they get is like this, whoa. Right? It's either then or it comes later, but it's never forgotten, right? So if a man is going through anger issues, a lot of the time, the feminine, being the beautiful spirit that she is going to try and help him to solve it. Because remember, the thing about women being the container, they see the possibility and potential of what the masculine can become. Right? So with the feminine, some of that time becomes self-destructive because maybe this is not the guy. This guy is so immersed in his shit, pardon the French, he ain't going to change because he doesn't want to change, right? It's being straight up, right? He doesn't want to change, right? So by you staying with this guy and trying to help him through it, it's not going to do anything. It's going to make it worse. Caveat there. So how does a woman help him to overcome it if he wants to change? Very important, right? Is to understand that mechanism within him. So he wants to go away and he wants to sort it out himself. That is okay. You don't have to hold him to it. So what you do is that you help him to do that. And you fill him with confidence. You can do this, honey. I know it's hard right now, but I'm sure you can find the answer. You always find the answer. You know you got this. You can do this. What can I do to help? Right? Is there anything I can get you? Is there anything I can... So support him like that. Don't draw the fact that, hey, man, you still haven't solved it? Man, it's been 3 weeks. That's not going to go down well. Right? Or trying to smother him. Say, I love you, let's sort it out together. Not going to work either. Right? So in general, again, this is very generalization because sometimes it doesn't work like this, but in general it does. Give him the space to work it out. Support him in the belief he can work it out for himself. And just be there for him. Not with him, but for him. So when he's ready to come back, hey, darling, you want something to eat? Or, hey, darling, should we go out and catch a movie? Right? And then let him come to you. Because a lot of the time then, the feminine is like, okay, so what happened? How did it do? What did you do? What did you think? How did you get through it? And he's like, oh, hang on a second. I don't want to talk about it. So she's like, you don't want to talk about it? Why not? Because that's how I would do. But you don't? What are you, nuts? Let's talk about it. Different. And then the worst part is then, when the woman is there and she's got, like that challenge and he runs away, she feels deserted, then you're back to square one, not even, you're worse than square one. It's going to prove very, very bad. So that's how the feminine can support the masculine. Now, the second part of your question was, how can men empower their women? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Was that it? Okay, great. So kind of the reverse of what I've just said, in a way, right? So it's understanding that ultimately she has the capacity. This is very masculine now. The way I'm about to say this is very masculine on purpose, right? She has the capacity to elevate you far beyond where you could get by yourself. Number one. So if most guys get that in their head, then it's like, it's not this other person, this is my partner. This is someone who's my teammate. Someone who can help me to go further and he's not always selfish, it's like go further for us. So that already invites a way to work together, as opposed to this conflict of competition that sometimes comes up in a relationship because like, oh, she's too successful. Men are like that. Get all nose out of joint and stuff. So how a man can support his woman is by communication, not trying to solve the problems of the world or her problems, knowing that she knows the answer, but just allowing her to speak it out through you. So just to be there, ask questions, be engaged, don't run away, don't find something better to do, right? Don't say, she's got this, I'll come back later on, none of that stuff, because then she feels like she's being deserted by you. So just be there in that way and support her through it, and you'll come out in a much better place.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. To conclude, it really makes me go back to the reason why you invented SpeakuP Monday. And I think that what you shared about looking at yourself in the mirror and about your skin, so often people go through things that we are completely and utterly unaware of, because they show up in such a completely different way. So we are surrounded by people who go through a lot of pain, but we are totally unaware of it. And what I am getting is that we really must ask questions, and we have almost like a duty of care to show an interest beyond the image that people portray. It's the digging deeper. And I know that it's one of the main reasons that you invented SpeakuP Monday. Yeah. So I wanted to thank you for that. I also wanted to thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here, because that certainly wasn't something that I imagined would happen. So thank you very much. I also wanted to thank Bhavna and Natalie for being on holiday and giving me a space to do this. Well done, girls. Thank you. And I wanted to thank Hichi, Ayu, Guzman, and Hadis, who are from Tropical Nomad. Thank you, Suksma, because this program would not be happening without you. I know that people can join the WhatsApp group and follow on social media. You will be watching live as well, so click the follow button just to make sure that you don't miss any episode. Thank you so much to the audience as well for participating, for being there. There is when we're up here, there is a lot that comes through the energy of the people that are in the room. And if you want to ask questions to Robert, I am telling you that you're going to stay here and you're going to answer those questions. Yes. Yeah, you're on duty tonight.
Yes, I will.
Before everyone goes, we're going to take a picture. So do not leave the room. And again, thank you so much for coming.